Hello everybody, Chris Beast here. In today's video we're going to be covering the idea of material drain. On your screen you now see, a chart and a lot of math. This is a slightly complicated idea, but first I'm going to explain why I'm going to explain the math, and then I'm going to explain the math. So, if you want to skip the math, I'm sure I'll put a timestamp in the description so you can skip it all, but let's get into this. Material drain is an idea that was proposed in Season 3. So at the time, the ADR was the overpowered weapon of its time. The ADR was extremely expensive, and the idea, not extremely expensive, it was extremely cheap and extremely common. And there was basically this floating idea of if you made the ADR so expensive that the material drain of the ADR could bankrupt somebody, then people would be unlikely to use the ADR. This is kind of, I think, a good idea. And it ended up working with the ADR. The ADR got changed, as you can see here, from 4 bullets per mats per bullet to 40. And with a player who typically brought 200, this just ended up bankrupting a lot of people and basically forced them off the ADR. The model on screen now is the model for the M16. So this right now, it looks like a lot of numbers that don't really mean much, but this here is mats and this here is minutes. To give an idea, a normal typical player, this is a thing that's not on the screen right now, normal typical player is going to end up playing in an X number of hours, correct? And I'm sure we can all agree on that one. So I'm going to go with, we could go with 12, and you see where the line ends up. We could go with 4, we can go with 6. I'm going to go with 6 because 6 is what I do. If you want to go with any number, it works. And I'm going to show you guys how to recreate these problems for yourselves, so you, if you're curious like I was, can do this yourself. So what's the point of this line I've just created? This line shows us what's I'm going to nickname realistic drain, because the M16 we all know is not a large enough number that it's actually going to drain all of your materials. Actually, it's not a large enough number that it's going to drain most of your materials, because the M16 is extremely cheap. This green line is basically a symbol of I only play for 6 hours, so even if worst case, if all the statistics are against me, which is what material drain is, this is a statistic that's extremely against you, even if it's all against me, this is what I'm going to end up with. And if that number is above 0, if that number is at 0, like based off that number you can make some conclusions about how expensive a weapon is. Now I want to clarify, nobody should walk away from this video using material drain as a practical number to calculate how much materials you will lose. That's not what it's meant for. It's a hypothetical number that is meant to show how expensive things are. No actual player will ever experience flat material drain, and there's 2 reasons for that. 1, you gather materials in a normal lobby. This is a huge one. The fact that you gain materials in a normal lobby makes every single one of these points go up slightly. 2, you gather extra weapons. A lot of people are going to deconstruct said extra weapons, or deconstruction in general will make this not as real of a situation. But completely throwing this statistic out the window is kind of stupid in my opinion, as it is what balanced the ADR. And if you're a player who wants to see balance brought to certain weapons, SG1, H-bar, some of the weapons I've heard, AKM is another weapon I've heard people want balancing to. This is a opportunity for you to give statistics to back your arguments. Instead of you just saying and screaming, well, broken, cheap, overpowered, you can bring up a way in which it can be fixed, or can't be fixed, or something. Here's just another statistic on your arsenal to make arguments. So again, I've been saying about the M16. This is my loadout personally. So here's the growth numbers. This is at maximum right now. Growth is based off minutes. That's the reason why it's 13. Everything in this is based off minutes. So when you look at this and it says 13 materials per minute, you're like, wow, that's extremely low. No, that's actually pretty high. Like, that's actually a pretty high number. Normally your growth rate is not very high at all. And the 13, this is the maximum levels. So that's where this G comes from. So as you can see, this is the growth rate. This gets multiplied by the number of minutes to get us this part of the equation. The M is your starting mass. For my situation, I wrote 1,000,000. You can change this to whatever you want, whatever you believe in. Now, I will note while I'm here, the second a statistic hits 0, you have to assume a rebound. I'm just clarifying this because I once saw somebody try to argue that no, my number would keep going into the negatives. Negatives aren't possible in Vigor. You can't spend negative materials. There's going to be a rebound of some form, even if it's only 10 mats. Right, moving back into the equation here. So as you can see, it's starting mats plus the amount of mats you gain per minute minus D. Now D is drain. That's what this entire equation is named after. Drain is an equation that takes the price of your loadout and multiplies it by minutes divided by the average length of an encounter. This is slightly more complicated. So the average length of an encounter is calculated really through 3 different ideas. The length of an encounter, so on average, we're looking at 12 minutes in an encounter. 8 minutes is drop, 10 to 11 minutes is when radiation comes in. I'm not positive exactly when it is, and 12 is going to be your average length round from my experience. You could be like Chris, no, I normally spend 16 minutes, and in that case, we can pop 16 in here. And as you can see, depending on the number I pop in here, 20, it's going to get slightly, because the T is down here in the argument, this equation is slightly going to go up, because we are shrinking the drain. So to reaffirm, just in case anyone's confused, when you shrink the T, you're shrinking the amount you're taking off the drain, which means this line will go up. Just clarifying. So if you spend a lot of time in encounters, I don't, then this line will be more stable. If you spend a lot of time setting up, or if you spend a lot of time loading out, let's say you spend a solid 5 minutes between your exit screen and your loading back into a shelter. So for me, it's normally 3 minutes. I spend a minute in the exit screen and then 2 minutes loading back into the shelter. And that's because I hit buttons really slowly when I'm exiting rounds. But this number could be anything, like literally anything, and it's just going to make this line go up. The smaller it is, and down the higher it is. So, this is currently an M16 loadout. That's what the L is. So the L is the loadout. This is 10 rounds, 10 mats per round. This is 5.56. I spend about 120. And this is your death statistic. So what's your rate of death? Subtract that number by 1.0. So I have a survival rating of 0.25. So no, it's 0.3 now. That's why this is 0.7. So 0.3, 1 minus 0.3 is 0.7. That's my death rate. So about 7 out of 10 rounds I die, because I'm a fucking idiot. Take that by the cost of your gun, because you're going to need to craft your gun back up when this becomes an issue. Now there is another statistic at play here, and I can't figure a way into working it into the normal problem, so I'm just going to put it down here. C. This is the amount of time it costs for you to craft your guns. Now normally speaking, T is going to be less than a normal average encounter time. So T is 7, actually, I'm wrong. The crafting time is going to be less than your average encounter time. So M16 is 0.25 of a minute, 15 seconds. Average encounter time is 17 minutes. So this statistic doesn't matter. But with a gun, let's say the ADR, I think it's about an hour nowadays, 0.28. So it takes around um, 4 encounters to craft 1 ADR. What this means, this only matters, and I don't know how to work this into the equation because with my gun and most of the examples I'm bringing up here, this isn't really a large factor because most people will have parts and most people will have spares anyway. But the thing to note here is if your survival rating is a number like mine, 0.7, where every 7 out of 10 rounds you need to craft another one, and you can only craft one every 4 rounds. This is hard to explain, but basically, the reason this number exists and the reason I can't put it into the equation is that is the amount of time it costs to physically craft a gun. Even if your survival rating is extremely low, like mine is, and you need to keep crafting your gun, if your gun takes longer than a round, and you're longer than it takes you to die again, then you still can't, like, it's not gonna work. I hope this makes sense, because you can't be faster than time. Like, it's just not how things work. I don't know if that made any sense, but I hope it did. Alright? Now, there is another thing I'm not contributing on the loadout screen, which is disinfectants and stuff like that. So that would be more numbers. I don't know, like, let's say 200 mats for, I think, disinfectants. Then that would, you know, steepen the line even more, or do whatever the heck it does to the line. So, I've covered all of the way on how this works. So basically, you're taking the amount you gain, subtracting it by the amount you lose, which is calculated by your loadout multiplied by the amount of time it takes you to play around. Very complicated. Well, not very complicated. It's a somewhat complicated formula for a very simple idea. So again, how can we put this to use? This is the M16. Let's change it to a gun that's more controversial. I'm going to bring it to pre-nerf ADR. So pre-nerf ADR, we're going to be looking at a normal player bringing 200 rounds. They're still going to be getting this 0.7 because it's still my KD. We want to keep it fair. And if I remember correctly, ADR used to be 1800 to craft, right? So that's that model, right? That's looking at an intersection point of 360, so 720 something. Alright, so let's actually write down this point because we want to keep it 720, so 360, 720 pretty much, right? So it's 360, 720. Why is it? That's not 367. Oh, yes it is. It's 720,000. I'm stupid. Yeah, okay. So this is ADR drain. This is ADR pre-nerf. So that's pretty high up on the thing. You know, you're not really looking at that bad of a scenario. But if we go into post-nerf, where it suddenly became 40 per round, still 200 rounds, still all of this is the same, the ADR now, as you can see, has jumped down to 365.68. Right? So now the question comes in, and how can we use this model to debate on whether... So there's a lot of debate on how to fix the SG-1. And a lot of that debate comes into this idea of the SG-1 isn't too expensive. I mean, I would disagree, personally, but we're not here for my opinion. We're here for the statistics. So let's do the SG-1. The SG-1, in this hypothetical, typical SG-1 player from the number of people I asked have said they bring 200. So this becomes 20. We're keeping the survival rating. However, they cost $16.50 to craft. So that puts the point right here at 675.00. So 360, 675.00. Alright, so this is SG1 now. So SG1 now is slightly under what the ADR pre-nerf is, which is why a lot of people when the ADR got nerfed, a lot of people said they went to the SG because, reasonably speaking, well, yes, it was more expensive. It was less expensive than the jump to the post-nerf ADR. Like, it was a lot less of a change. So it's changed some variables on the SG1. Some suggestions I've heard have said change the ammo type to put it up to 35. I don't exactly agree with this, but let's see what it would do. Well, if we do this, then the SG would be looking at a 611.871. Again, from a math standpoint, it would be looking at slightly above what the ADR is now. So a lot of people who argue this change state that it should occur because it's as strong as the ADR. It's up there with the ADR, so it should have costs rivaling the ADR, at least ammo-wise. I disagree with this point. The SG1 ammo is also used by the G3. The G3 is a staple gun for mid-tiers. Making the G3 outrageously expensive would help really nobody. But it is interesting to, play with statistics. So putting this back down to 20. If we take this and we change the 1650 to, I don't know, let's change it to the ADR of the 1800. Well, if we do that, that does nerf the SG1. Gets you 651. So 360 divided by 651. Right? It does still nerf the SG1. SG1 craft cost change. Right? Still nerfs the SG1. We're still looking at an SG1 that's noticeably down. But the important thing to note here is this is not enough of a change. It's only a 25,000 mat, which I'm saying only here because you have to realize this is over the course of 6 hours. It's such a minor change that it wouldn't do much. So we are left in a rock and a hard place. We either change the SG1's ammo and make the situation for SG players slightly worse. I mean, very worse, like horrible, but also throw the G3 and many other of its ammo type out the window as they would be too expensive to be reasonably used, or we can nerf the cost and do very little, and most likely most players wouldn't even be affected due to having stockpiles and won't need to craft more. The reason I bring this up now is because material drain is something I've heard be brought up over and over again on how we can fix it, because it's very obvious to fix the ADR. It made the ADR not irrelevant. ADR still has, to my knowledge, 8% frequency at the moment. So it's not irrelevant. It's just expensive, as a top tier gun should be. But this type of solution isn't simple. And it worked with the ADR because the ADR had a specific designated ammo. The SG1 does not. So we got to be very careful on how we're changing balancing here. I would love to see, again, here's the equations. Change them all any way you want. I want to see if someone can make a conclusion on how to nerf the SG1 material-wise based off this model. I don't think it's possible, personally. I don't think an SG1 balance through material loss will ever matter, but I've been surprised before. Alright, so as a quick exit note that I forgot to note, there are two people who helped me make this video. Donnie Brasco provided a lot of statistics that I used for the growth models, while Damos de Manos, I'll have his channel link in the description, he helped a ton with the descending rates, because I won't lie, I don't remember the stats of how much materials you produce or how much things cost. I can't remember that stuff off the top of my head, so I needed people to help me get those statistics, and they were willing to help.
So I gotta appreciate them for that. I know this ended up being a lot larger of a video than I originally anticipated. I mean, we're talking 22 minutes now. Much longer than I originally thought it was going to be. But I hope any of you guys that have made it this far enjoyed, maybe learned something, maybe didn't, maybe just listen to my insanity for 22 minutes. But if you want to see more stuff like this, I have some more ideas, not as insane as this, but up this alley coming out in the next couple weeks. So make sure you hit the subscribe. And if you want to talk to more people who are more interested in the analytical side of this game, then hit the Discord description. Discord links in the description. Wow, English. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.